It's very, very nice to see so many people here to listen to what I've got to say. Nice to see, or what I assume is, a lot of like-minded people in the room who are all looking for ways to sustain the economy, look for ways for improvement, so that we can organise ourselves more effectively and efficiently to get through the troubled times that the economy is putting us through at this moment. So I welcome you all here. I hope you enjoy the next 3 days. And I also hope you enjoy the next 40 minutes. Okay, because that's how long I've got you for. So in terms of my presentation to you today, there are really 3 themes that I'm going to talk to you about. That's 5 rules of organisational readiness to assess the current state for operational improvement. Has my mic just gone? You're okay? Okay. Thank you. 3 levels of what we call a people plan. So the levels at which we should apply some of these principles. And at that point, I'll be able to touch on a few client examples to maybe bring some of these concepts to life. But let's start by looking at the title of the presentation that I said that I was going to give to you today. And in particular, this word catalyst. You know, 5 catalysts for implementation success. Well, you take a little bit of a search, obviously, on Wikipedia or on the net, and we get a few definitions of what we mean by catalyst. And so I don't know if there are any chemists in the room. Maybe there are, but that word catalyst. A substance that modifies and increases the rate of reaction without being consumed in the process. Okay, so if we think about that in terms of operational improvement and the things that we're trying to do in our businesses, what do we apply to try and increase that rate of continuous improvement, but doesn't actually get consumed in the process? One that precipitates a process or an event. Well, the thing that we use to precipitate processes and events in continuous improvement or Lean or Six Sigma is the thing that's between our ears. Okay? We've got to use our brains. So the catalyst, or a catalyst, to ensure that we've got all the things that we need in place and that we're implementing things in the right way, is of course how we apply our grey matter. So I'm going to explore that a little bit. And to help me, okay, I've actually devised a very short and very simple quiz. Okay, so on your chairs, when you walked in, you found a slip of paper. There's going to be a short quiz. I've got a few questions that I'm going to ask you, and then we're going to look at the answers later on. Okay? So hopefully we're going to get a little bit of engagement and involvement from folks in the audience here. Okay? So please use that answer sheet provided. I'll put the questions up in a little moment or two. Write your name on the answer sheet. If you don't want to be recognised, you can put any name, okay, as long as it's not illegal or offensive. Okay? Or you're breaching copyright, of course. You are expected to work quickly, and you will have a limited amount of time to answer the question. You may find some questions harder than others, okay, but there are only 5. You'll have approximately 10 seconds for each question, then the question will disappear from the screen, and obviously scribble your answer down, and then we'll move on to the next question. And then once you've answered all 5 questions, what I'd like you to do is fold your answer sheet in half, and then just swap it with somebody next to you and say hello and introduce yourself so that we get to know each other around the room. But also, they've got your answers, and we're going to get to those answers at the end of the presentation. Okay? So if anybody needs a pen, one of my beautiful assistants is just wandering around with a tub of pens. Assuming there's no questions on what I'm asking you to do here, let's move on to the first question. Okay, oh, there's a few people needing pens. So the first question. What is the product or multiple of 2 and 2? Oh. Okay, so You had your 10 seconds. You had a few more than 10 seconds then because I clicked a number of times and it wouldn't move on. Okay, so that's your first question. Your second question is, if two people enter a singles tennis Grand Slam competition, assuming it is played under normal Grand Slam knockout rules, how many matches have to be played to get the one winner of the tournament? Very good. Okay? Question 3. Together, a bat and ball cost €1.10. If the bat costs €1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? Okay? Question 4. What is the product of 64 and 64 and 64 to the nearest 10,000? Giving you a bit of a leeway there. Okay, and your fifth and final question. If there are 64 people entering a singles tennis Grand Slam competition, assuming it is normal Grand Slam knockout rules, how many matches have to be played to get the winner of the tournament? There we go. 5 questions in the KT quiz for EMS 2012. Okay, so fold your answer sheet in half. Okay, give it to somebody next to you, preferably somebody you don't know who you can bribe later on. Okay? And if you've swapped once, of course, you can swap again, just to mix it around a little bit. Okay. Okay. All right, no conferring on answers, please. No conferring on answers. We'll come to that later on. Okay. There's a new business book out. I'll say new. It's been out for about a year. Some of you may have heard of it. Have anybody heard of this book? Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Okay, all right. So apparently it's a bestseller, but obviously not in this room. Okay, I've read this book on a recommendation, and it's thinking it really does challenge some of the paradigms that we have maybe already accepted about how we think. Okay, and some of the things that came out from that book have informed some of the things that I want to talk about today, and also some of the questions that I asked you to answer in that short quiz. And the first thing is that our brains are actually lazy. We naturally rely on our experience. Okay, now I'll hold my hand up and I'll say my brain is lazy. Okay? I don't want to cast dispersions on any one individual. This is a general comment. Okay? Humans find it hard work to think. So our brains are naturally lazy. We naturally extend what we know to instinctively respond to challenges. You know, when there's a problem around the planet, how many people say they know what the cause of it is? You speak to 8 people and you get 8 different causes. They instinctively know that they're right. Yet probably at least 7 of them are wrong, even if not all 8. Thinking things through is hard work. You've only got to think about when you took your driving test, or you put yourself in a new situation. You've got to concentrate really, really hard. Thinking is hard work. And thinking is framed and guided to face the challenges of the moment. So by what we read in the latest articles, by what we hear on the news channels, by what our peers are telling us that's going on out there in the marketplace. So perhaps when it comes to operational excellence and implementing the improvement philosophies that we've got, our brain needs a little bit of help. Okay? I'm not saying we can't do the job if we have all the time and resources, but sometimes the brain needs a little bit of help. So, in terms of looking at successes, because we're talking about 5 catalysts of implementation success, we first of all need to understand the failures. I've spoken there about, if you like, some of the failures of the brain, but if you speak to people about their improvement efforts and what have hampered them, what have stopped them from going so well, then it's typically, oh, you know, we don't have enough people. We haven't got enough capacity to do what we want. We haven't got enough time. Okay, there are so many different priorities out there that we don't know which ones to focus on all the time, and we're jumping around all over the place. And of course, there's that old chestnut about how much money have we got to be able to do the things that we want to do. So, okay, yeah, I get all of that. But at the end of the day, if it's the way we apply our grey matter, we should be able to overcome some of those issues. So let's have a look at what a simple implementation model might look like to help us maybe overcome some of those issues. So we talk about, in a human capital-led improvement program, about 5 things that are going to help guide any of those implementation projects. So that is ensuring that we understand what the goal is, it's that big circle in the middle. Ensuring we know what capability we need to go and achieve that goal. Integrate it with the processes that we've got around the business or the processes that we need to improve. Ensure that the leadership and management are actually on board and engaged in terms of aligning performance systems from top to bottom of the organisation. And making sure that there's opportunities for lifelong learning in terms of coaching to ensure that people don't get bogged down and don't get up that learning ladder as quickly as we'd like them to. Now, some of you very kindly participated in a survey that we did over the last 4 or 5 weeks. So we sent out a link to a survey to all of the delegates and suppliers from the EMS conference, to which we got some responses. And examples of questions are on the slide here. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail because, of course, if you took the survey, you'll know what the questions are. And if you didn't take the survey, then obviously you've missed out on an opportunity. Okay, but you'll get the slides afterwards and you'll be able to see examples of some of those questions. Because it's about understanding where we are against each of those 5 elements that then can help prepare us for that journey to achieve the improvement goals that we've set ourselves. So, looking at those 5 areas, what we're saying is you've got to acknowledge the journey and set your target. Understand the capability gaps that you've got and set your priorities to close them. Make sure your solutions are integrated with the processes to deliver value. Align the expectations and make sure your leadership team are leading by example. And never rest. Coach for exceptionally high performance. So we ask questions in those 5 areas. And I've just picked out some highlights for you. And remember, this is from the people that you see around you. Okay, we haven't taken it in terms of respondents outside of the EMS delegate list and attendee list. So we got quite a bit of agreement on that first element. 90% of stakeholders are aligned on the KPIs that we're putting in place, the targets that we're actually establishing. Great, fantastic. Top to bottom of the organisation, every function, 90% of people are saying, yes, we're aligned. So we know where we're going. Actually, that's pretty good. Okay? But then you start to go down the list and you say, well, the further we sort of go down this implementation track, the worse it sort of gets. Okay, so 80% of people know that skills need improving. Okay, that means 20% of people don't know that skills need improving, but they probably do recognise that they haven't got the skills that they need. 70% of people feel that their processes are clearly understood. 23% therefore don't. 65% of business leaders know what behaviours are expected, so 35% don't. And 36% of people take the time to get things right first time, so 64% of people are not taking the time to get it right first time. I want to explore that last point in a little bit more detail. What I've done is just pulled out the data that was in response to that question. Do people have the opportunity to reflect on what has been observed before going into action? So the purple quadrant on the top right-hand corner there is people leap straight to action or conclusion without understanding the context or the situation. The yellow down at the bottom there, People are encouraged to take the time, but actually they don't. Wow. And then the top left, in terms of the light blue, people are encouraged to take the time, and they know they should. We spend the time getting it right the first time, rather than wasting time doing it over. So if we relate that back to the work of Daniel Kahneman in terms of his book and the insights that he got from the research that he'd done and the little exercise that we did earlier on, you know, two-thirds of people are sort of leaping straight into action, relying on their instinct, relying on their experience, and not necessarily thinking it through the right way. How does that mirror to what your expectations are and what your experiences are? Maybe there's some correlation. It was certainly a correlation for me. And what that means is then that we've got excellent agreements on targets and the capabilities, but getting things right on the ground appears not to be as successful. So that's consistent with our experience that involvement and engagement are actually essential for implementation success. We've got to make sure that we create the time, the resources to prioritise on those things and make sure we're spending the effort engaging with the hearts and minds of people to get stuff done. So if that's true then, okay, at what levels should we do that? Well, our belief is that we've got to be doing it at 3 levels. We've got to do it at the organisational level, we've got to do it at the team level, and we've got to do it at the individual level. And so what I've got is just 3 examples, one at each, in terms of experiences that I've had or my team have had in dealing with some of the issues around trying to ensure that there is implementation success in the improvement activities that are going on. So if we look first of all at this organisational level, you'll get the slide, so I'm not expecting you to read the boxes, but this is just a simple framework that we use to guide what we look for, the interconnections that we're looking for when we're going into an organisation for the first time. It's what we call an enterprise model. There are certain things inside this black box that obviously we can control. All of the yellow boxes, we can't. They're all external. We might be able to influence them or react to them, but we certainly don't control them. So as an organisation, we've got to make sure we can understand what we can control and the interconnection of all of those different elements and those things that we can't control. So it's very much like a lot of the complicated systems, machines, processes that you've already got around your organisations. There are interconnected parts. You change one thing, you've got to change something else to accommodate for it. It's the same with the organisation. You change the structure, you've got to look at the roles. You change the process, you want to look at the systems. You look at the culture, you've got to look at the behaviours. You've got to look at the measurements that are driving some of those behaviours. So there's interconnections right the way down the line. So understanding those is important. So we've been working with a vaccine manufacturer who've been implementing their new strategy. And they've had some of the typical issues, too much to do and nowhere near enough resources. That they need to understand the connections and implications so that they can set some priority against their strategic goals, i.e. they can phase the work in an appropriate way. They've clearly defined the change roles and the time devoted to make things happen. Hey, that's good. Understanding what our limitations actually are. And that's been done with the help of the enterprise model and looking at those interconnections that actually exist between the different elements. And then over time they're being coached to actually identify what those critical moments are in the change program and take the appropriate action. Use their grey matter, use their brain power in the most appropriate way depending upon what the issues are that arise at that particular point in time. So at an organisational level, yes, it's strategic, yes, it's big picture, but we've still got to think about all of those things because there are implications, of course, that flow down the organisation. So a frame, like the enterprise model, can help frame your thinking and frame your answers because that's how our brains work. They like to be framed. At a team level, different teams need different roles to actually get some things done. So we've got a framing tool here which is all about understanding what the situation is that team is engaged with, what the variables are that they've actually got to consider, so that we can then choose the right sort of involvement behaviour that's required from that team in terms of reaching that decision. I mean, there are two key elements. Is this decision really important to the business? And actually, what sort of support do I need to ensure implementation success? If it's actually very important, and it's of course going to cost a lot of money, and it's critical to get all the functions on board for implementation success, we're going to be right over on the far side here, because we're going to be resolving it as a group. We're looking for consensus. But at the other end of the spectrum, we might be able to resolve some things alone. You've still got to apply your brain power to actually work it out. Client, a managing director that I was working with last year for a high technology capital equipment organisation, it came round to that time of year where it was the annual salary and wage negotiations, you know, some of the times that we either love or dread, depending upon your outlook. But he was certainly dreading it because he was seeing the order book going down, he was getting pressure from the finance director, but engineers were leaving. Not a good sign, and the manufacturing director was always concerned that the people on the shop floor were undervalued and underpaid. You know, you've got those competing objectives, but actually as a leadership team you've got to come together and you've got to make a decision which is good for the business. So the MD knew that he needed an engaging involvement style to bring all of those different parties together. And they actually, when they reflected, when they took the time to reflect, because the first meeting they had, when he spoke to me about it, I said, look, you want to try a few of the things here. You know, they were at each other's throats, looking after their own agendas, because they were acting emotionally, they were acting on instinct, they were acting on the experiences that they had, rather than taking that step back and reflecting and thinking about what was actually required. When they did that, with the MD's coach and coaching and guidance, then they actually got a result which helped the organisation. Okay? So instead of giving the shop floor workers lots and giving the folks in research nothing, they ended up with an innovative solution which actually they hadn't thought of until they took time to reflect. They gave everybody the same amount. Everybody got £500. Okay? So the shop floor were quite happy because they got, relatively speaking, more than the folks in the leadership team. But for folks in R&D, it was fair and equitable because everybody got the same. At an individual level, we've got to look at things so that they're clear and concise, very specific and simple, because things can very easily get confused. So we've got a framing tool here which is around the performance system, which has got people at its heart, but there's lots of other things that actually influence the way they behave. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of that, but I'm quite happy to talk to you offline about it. But in terms of that particular model, the example that springs to mind for me is when I was working with a quality director of a frozen food company. And they were introducing lots of new product innovations at a particular point in time, but they were taking a long time to actually get them introduced. And when we took a little bit of time to reflect and understand what was going on, it was fairly clear. R&D would be asking for information from manufacturing. As soon as you possibly can, I'd like this test to be run. I'd like this data to be collected. I'd like that action to be done. Now, of course, when you're making that request, as soon as you possibly can, what assumptions are you making? Is that in the next 5 minutes? Is it in the next 5 hours? Is it in the next 5 days? Of course, the person making the request was making completely different assumptions about that compared to the person who was receiving the request. Oh, I can do it as soon as I possibly can. Well, that's great. I've got a full diary for the next 3 weeks. Okay, I can't possibly actually fit it in. Okay, wow, and immediately then you've got the conflict. Okay, so as part of the situation piece of that model, there are three key questions that we ask around: have performance expectations been established? Have they actually been clarified with the person that you're asking to do it? But also, more importantly, does the person agree that these expectations are attainable? Okay? And that's where this particular example fell down. So some simple coaching, some simple advice, and people getting a lot clearer in terms of what they were trying to articulate and what they were looking for. it actually helped them overcome some of their issues. Yeah, some of the things that we do for the very best reasons, but we do because we're pressed in terms of time. So getting that involvement that we need, getting as detailed as we need to, doesn't always come easy, just like our thinking. So we've looked at sort of 5 areas, 5 catalysts, as I've called them, to implementation success, and 3 levels at which we actually apply those. So if you want to talk more about those, then by all means come and find me, my colleagues later on. I'll give you the stand number at the end of the presentation. But I think probably you folks are now more interested in, okay, how did we do in that quiz? Okay, because, all right, I've spoken about how can we frame things, and we've got those 5 catalysts and the 3 different levels. But actually, how good are we? How good are people in the room? So let's remind ourselves of those questions. Okay, what is the product of 2 plus 2? You can read the questions as well as I can. Okay, so in terms of that first question, has anybody got an answer there? Oh, sorry. Obviously, open up the answer sheet. If you've got red pens, that's good. You can play teacher for your colleague, your newfound friend next to you. Okay, so anybody got an answer to the first question? What's the first question? What's the answer? 4. Very good. Excellent. So hopefully there was nobody who got that wrong. Okay, second question. If 2 people enter a singles tennis Grand Slam competition, assuming it's normal Grand Slam knockout rules, etc., 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 how many matches have to be played to find the winner of the tournament? 1. Yeah, hey, pretty easy that one. Cool. Together, a bat and ball cost €1.10. If the bat costs €1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? How much does the ball cost? 5 cents. How many people have got 10 cents on their answer sheet? Can I have some hands raised, please? Wow, okay, don't be shy, because remember, it's not your answer. It's the person next to you. So let's see it again. How many people have got 10 cents on the answer sheets? Okay, so about half in terms of the group. Yeah, how did we get that one so wrong? Half the group got it, half the group didn't. Pressure, instinct, and how that works. You know, you only had 10 seconds to work out what it was. You read some key bits of information. I'm sorry to say, some people's brains got a little bit lazy. What is the product of 64 and 64 and 64 to the nearest 10,000? Anybody got an answer for me on that one? Okay, all right. Here are the answers. 4, 1, we got that one. 5 cents. The answer for this one is 262,144. So I'd accept 260,000 or 270,000. Okay? Now, we're a bunch of engineers. Okay? Most people around here are maybe engineers. I hope you would be able to actually work a calculator, or even do the mental arithmetic with a bit of pen and a bit of paper to actually work out what the product of 64, 64 and 64 is, and we would get the answer. But it'd take time, and it'd take us using our grey matter. Okay? Now, a final question. If there are 64 people, I'd say, who are in this tennis tournament, and we need to find the one winner of the tournament, how many matches do we have to play? 63. How many people did not get 63? Remember, you've got the answers for somebody else. So there are a few other, oh goodness me, there are quite a few other different answers there. Okay? Now, again, how is our brain working? Could we have worked it out? Absolutely we could. But there's also a very quick way of working that out. And I think I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to be able to tell you the quick way unless I see you on stand 36. Okay? The answer is 63, yes. Okay, so have you exercised your grey matter enough? You're going to be here for a few days to exercise your grey matter. I haven't got any more quizzes for you, so I'm just going to wrap things up now. Obviously, my focus is very much on human capital. It's about developing the people who actually exercise their grey matter to make your systems work, to make your processes work, to ensure that we're actually doing the best for those people as we strive to make the organisation better. And one of my colleagues shared with me a little bit of a joke, which I've got the punchline for here. And sort of development, what development? You know, he's always saying, I don't give him enough time to develop his skills, but that's something else that we need to talk about. But the scenario is that the CFO says to the CEO, what if we develop our people and they leave? Okay, wow, okay, what a dilemma that is. We're spending all of this money and then we're just seeing it out of the door, seeing it walk out of the door. So what's the answer? I don't know how many people have actually heard this. Maybe some of you have. I've got a few smiling faces around the room. But of course the answer is, what if we don't develop them and they stay? Yeah, maybe we've had a little bit of that in our experiences as well. So, thank you very much indeed for listening to me. My name's Martin Wing. If you want to talk more about what Kepner-Tregoe do, and some of the experiences that we've had and whether it relate to some of the issues that you've got and whether we'll be able to help you or not, then please do come and visit us on stand 36. But I'm very happy, goodness me, how do you put that picture in there? I'm very happy to take some questions now, if there are any questions from the floor. If there's no questions from the floor, I've got one question, actually, of the audience. And that is, how many people have heard of Kepner-Tregoe before? Okay, so about a quarter of you. Okay, lovely. So I'd love to understand your previous experiences of working with KT. So again, find us at the exhibition stand and we can have a chat about the experiences that you've previously had. So any questions? No questions, goodness me. Well, the final plug then, if I may, I've written a paper which is called The 5 Catalysts of Implementation Success, which covers a lot of the points that I've spoken about during the presentation, together with a colleague of mine. So, again, if you'd like to pop by the stand, you can pick one of these up, and then you don't have to rely on the notes that you've made during the last 40 minutes. Thank you very much indeed for your time, everybody.